Hello, community, and welcome back to another Keeping It Real with Dr. Anita podcast. I am your host, Dr. Anita Polite Wilson, C-Suite Trusted Advisor, Elite Team Strategist, and Board Director, preparing businesses to navigate culture, complexity, and change. I am back with my special guest, Avish Parashar, and we are still talking about how we can lean into 2025 and the heavy topics that we're faced with without getting weighed down. Avish, great to have you back with me today.
Hey, it is great to be back. Thank you.
I've been having such a good time. And right now, we're going to talk about SMART goals versus non SMART goals and specificity versus visionary. And I have to say, it kind of seems like you need to clarify for me how being visionary is not also smart when you talk about SMART versus non SMART goals. So tell us some more about that.
Sure. So when I'm talking about SMART goals here, I'm talking about the acronym, which you've been in the world of goal setting for more than a day. You've heard of SMART goals, which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
Correct.
And this is the way we are taught to make goals. And I'm not opposed to that. I think it's great for most situations. My challenge, the reason I think if non-SMART goals can be very helpful and potentially more visionary is because some of those words get in the way. And I think the one that gets in the way the most is attainable. So the point of a SMART goal, the strength of a SMART goal to me is the weakness of the SMART goal. And what happens is with a SMART goal, you set this goal that it's very specific and you can measure it and you can see it and it's attainable. And you make a checklist like, all right, here's my goal. I've phrased it so carefully that now I know here's the checklist. And all I got to do is go down that checklist and do these items and I'm going to achieve that goal. Awesome. That's the strength. That's also the weakness, because if you're just going through a checklist, you are not required to think or be creative. That's the point. I don't got to think. I don't got to be creative. This is what I need to do. But as someone who has done improv comedy for 30 years instead of getting a real job, I will tell you that engaging and accessing our creativity is what makes us motivated and engaged. And so when we set a non-SMART goal, and by a non-SMART goal, what I say is set an impossible goal. Set a goal that your first thought when you think about that goal is, yeah, but I can't do that. Or yeah, but I have no idea how I would achieve that. Then figure out how to achieve it. And just look at your yes buts, right? I think we've all got what I call a persistent yes but. There's some goal that keeps popping in our mind. And every time that pops up, your mind says, yeah, but not now. Yeah, but I don't have time. Yeah, but I don't know how to do that. That's the goal. Because if your mind keeps giving you that idea, that means that on some level, your subconscious thinks there's relevance to it. When you say yes and to it, it's not a SMART goal because you don't know. It's not reasonable or attainable. It might not even be specific yet. But then let your mind play. Because when you set a big goal, now, the one letter in the SMART acronym that makes sense is relevant.
Yes.
Because if you set a giant goal that is not relevant to you, if you're like, oh, I would love to increase my company's profits by 30% this quarter. That's a great goal, but if it's not relevant to you, you're going to burn out, right? Or if it's a goal you feel you should have. Like, one of the first times we talked about health. And if your goal is like, I'm going to lose 50 pounds this year, great. But if you really deep down don't want to, or you don't care about it. But if you set a really big goal, like, hey, and it's really important to you, then what happens is you need to go out and figure out how to achieve that. So what do? You start engaging your creativity in brainstorming. You let your mind play with ideas. You have to learn, right? And learning is engaging. You have to go out and say, I don't know how to do this. Well, let me learn how to do it. You have to engage in dialogue in others. And then you go to sleep and then you wake up in the morning, you got this new idea. So this, I think, how visionary change happens. When you combine taking a goal you don't know how to achieve that is very relevant to you, and then start engaging your creativity and playfulness to figure it out. Not smart, but I think that's how some of the biggest progress happens.
Let's go back for a minute, because there were two things that you said. Well, there was one thing that you said that led to three different thoughts for me when you mentioned the word attainable. And when you talk about the fact that we all have a yes but goal that's persistent in our heads, and you talk about whether or not it's attainable, there's three things that come to mind for me. First of all, Are we being realistic about where we're starting? Are we being realistic about where we're trying to go? And are we being realistic how to get there? That speaks to the attainability. But then there's also the milestones along the way. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with AIM SMART goals, but AIM is another acronym for acceptable, which is your bare minimum, ideal, which is meeting that goal, and the middle, you're halfway there. And then when you talk about, the yes, but and attainability, there's fear, I think, associated with the yes, but, and that could be associated with false evidence appearing real. So when we think about those three factors, being realistic, having an aim in front of that goal, whether it's smart or not, and then the tendency for fear to kind of stop us, how do all of those play into a non-smart goal?
Sure. So I think I like the aim thing because it lessens it a little bit. It's like letting us know that that's the whole point of an impossible goal is you might not achieve it.
Right.
What was interesting in the attempting of achieving it, you might uncover a new goal, or you might grow as a person in a way that opens up. So setting these different levels, I think, is great. It's like, here's the aspirational one, but all right, this is okay too. The fear, totally get that. And, as you know, I'm sure the fear could come from the fear of failing. It could come from the fear of succeeding. It could come from the fear of the change you have to make to achieve that goal. And this is where I think the creativity and playfulness becomes, I think this is where actually setting an impossible goal is better for the fear. And there's this club. I didn't start this. I found it when I was researching this. It's called a failure club. And it's this thing. It's like around the world. They have these failure clubs where the members all make a goal, a 1-year goal that has like a 99% chance of failure. And the point of setting a goal that big that has such a high chance of failure is it takes away the pressure and the fear. Because if my goal is to say my goal is to perform at an open mic next in the first quarter of next year, that scares me because I'm like, I'm not me per se because I've done it before, but that'll scare a person,
right?
Because it's like, oh, well, God, I got to do that, and that's pressure and fear. If my goal is within a year, I'm going to get my own Netflix special, right? There's a 99.9% chance that's not going to happen. So what the heck do I care if it works or doesn't? So my mind starts playing. Like, what can I do to get a Netflix special? Whoa. Then the idea of going an open mic is like, oh, now do an open mic. Okay, great. Do an open mic. And all of a sudden, so when the goal is so big, you're like, there's no pressure to achieve it. I think that's where the attainable actually works against us, because then you get the burden of expectation. You get the burden of like, oh, here's right. Versus the playfulness and creativity of, oh, this is nuts. Let me just play.
So how does that apply to the workplace? Because there's stretch goals that everybody has heard of that seem crazy unattainable. And when it happens, that's great. If it doesn't, we do tend to beat ourselves up on it. Or if it's part of our accountabilities for the year, there are consequences around that. So how do we help? How can we apply this to work in a way that really will work for us and not against us?
Sure. And again, context matters. So it depends kind of what position you're in.
Right.
If you're the leader, this is where you would have to commit to the moonshot. And this is like also kind of a side thing. Unless you're independently wealthy, you can't devote all of your time and energy to an impossible goal. Right. So I got the grunt work, the grind work I do every day, my marketing, my writing, but I've got that engaging impossible goal that I'm like, this is the thing I really want to do, and I don't know how I'm going to do it. So in the same way, if you're the leader, you can set your team up or organization up to do this. Be like, here's the goal we're going for. And this is where the yes and matters so much, because in order to leverage the power of the impossible, you have to yes and your team. You have to say, hey, our goal is to go global this year. And you're a small, 20-person company. People are going to come to you with ideas for what are the steps for that. You can't say yes, but to every idea, because all that, it's got to be more playful. Like, yeah, and what if we did that? What would happen, right? So that's it. Now, if you're not the leader, if you can't make that decision, this is where you need to kind of fit it into your own, either within the context of your work or outside of work separately. So you've got your stretch goal, let's say your sales, I got to hit these sales. But maybe your impossible goal that you set for yourself is, hey, I'm going to figure out how to get 10 times that goal with no outbound marketing. Now that's dumb, right? You hear that, you're like, you're an idiot. As a salesperson, that is a dumb goal. Perfect. Now you play. You'll still make your sales calls. You'll still hit your stretch goals and work on your stretch goals. But then when you've got time, as your subconscious is noodling, whoa, I just went through this tough sales piece. How could I automate that? How could I repeat that? How could I make that unnecessary? Right. So you have to like, don't lose your job, right? Don't go broke. Find a way of fitting this within the framework or outside of what you're already doing. Because the thing about the stretch goal, it's not about achieving something today. It's about how can I make my life better in a year or 3 years, or 5 years.
I really like where this is going. And community, this is a good place to pause, because what occurred to me when you said yes and what if, I think that's where we can tie the what if to creativity and play. And that's what we're going to talk about in, unfortunately, our last conversation with Avish. So please come back. And if this podcast did a little something for you, made you think a little different ways, please share it with your community, post it with your own thoughts. This is a learning community, and I want to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, please stay in the flow with me. Follow, like, and overshare any of my podcasts that help you to reframe hot topic conversations from difficult to different. Until next time, this is Dr. Anita reminding you to stay blessed and keep it real.